All right. Well, welcome everybody to this meeting. It's a joint meeting between the Golden Gate chapter and the Pacific Northwest chapters, all the way up the coast to Vancouver to our Canadian chapter, as well as to the AGS chapters that are all in our areas as we've been inviting each other to each other's meetings. I want you to know that this is being recorded. So if you have any concerns about that, you can keep yourself muted. You can hide your face by just having your black panel. You can change the name however you want to do it if you prefer to remain anonymous, but otherwise it will be recorded. We have several people from the GIA here tonight. We have Anna, who's, Anna, do you want to wave? A big wave so everybody can see you. And then we have Debbie Flores, who you probably hear on the phone, but she's very quiet and in the background and she gets so much done. And then we have our new alumni, what is the correct title, Catherine? President?
I'm the executive director of the Alumni Association.
So we'd like to just hear a little bit from Catherine about what's going on with our alumni.
Sure. No, well, and thank you for letting me say a few words before we get into a great presentation. I have been working with the alumni team over the entire sort of COVID period. Once we sort of went into shutdown, I've been in the business development side for GIA for a few years now, and decided that really it's one and the same. So many of our alumni are the same business clients that we're meeting with, and I had really gotten to know so many of you over the last few years, and we decided that we were going to make some big changes. We have created a new business unit for our Alumni Association. We really will be launching as we get into this year. We've had a little slowdown, obviously, just not being back in the office, but one of the big changes that you'll see, and we're going to talk a little bit about this next week, which I want to make sure we mention Knowledge Rocks Week, but it really is me focused on a lot of continuing education. That's been the one thing that we've heard from alumni for a long period of time is what's next? What else can GIA help to provide? So we've got a series of 15 to 20 seminars that we're ready to start launching. And this next week, because we can't be in Tucson, we decided to host 3 different colored stone focused seminars. So hopefully all of you have been receiving the emails about it. If you haven't, we can put up the link information in the chat, or we can send you an email afterwards. But you can register still for, there's a colored stone origin. We've got a low temperature heat treatment. So, you know, lots of things that are obviously of interest to this group. But also on February 4th, besides our regular weekly knowledge session that we'll be hosting, we've got our first virtual global alumni event. Wow. So it'll be 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. time. So I hope all of you will tune in. And Susan Jock's going to have a message for us. I'll speak a little bit about some changes coming in the year for Alumni Association, and we will also be sharing all of the finalist designs for the Bucciolati Foundation's design contest and announcing the winner. So those are things that we would have done if we were all in Tucson at the alumni cocktail party. So we're replacing it with a virtual event. It's the best we can do this year. And of course, you know, no charge for that. It'll be about an hour of your time next Thursday. So hope you all will join us. And, but, you know, Debbie, Anna, and I are always available. We're happy to take a phone call and email and look forward to working more closely with all of you. So thanks for having us tonight.
Yay, well, thank you all for hosting, because GIA has hosted this Zoom meeting for us, which is a real advantage for the alumni chapters, is that otherwise the chapter itself has to pay for a Zoom conference call, and the GIA is stepped in and started hosting the meetings for chapters, which is a great benefit to all of us. If you would like to attend the the opening next week, the Knowledge Rocks, you did get an email that has the GIA alumni embedded in it, and you register for that event. So you do need to register for it. So make sure you go into the link that's it came last week, and register for that event. And it also registers you for the Bucciolati one, if I'm not mistaken, for the design contest. So you do have to step up yourselves, you guys, and register for that event. One thing I wanted to mention is that this is the time for scholarships applications at GIA. And as you know, our GIA alumni here in San Francisco sponsors scholarships for Northern California residents. And I believe we have two. I know one for sure where we combined Gary Crispino's scholarship, what was left of that, and funds that have not been used in prior times, and created one scholarship. And typically we have two, but you need to apply. So gia.edu scholarships, and apply for our local scholarship. Mind you, when you go into that data pool, you will be registered for all the scholarships GIA offers, and there are a ton of them. And they will figure out which scholarship actually gives you the most funding. So you may get a fund, you may be funded by a different scholarship, but the key is that you applied. And so ours specifically is for Northern California residents, but there are so many scholarships for you. So please take a moment and apply. It's enough to give you a course and some, insight into something new, like the Pearls course. And, if you learn something new every day, it was worth getting out of bed. So apply for those scholarships. And now moving on to our meeting, just a few courtesies. Sheahan's movies and slides are proprietary, so please do not use them on your social media. If you would like to have access to his slides of any kind, you can contact Sheahan Stephen, and he will allow you or not to use his features. Number two is the chat room down at the bottom. If you have a question, please type it into the chat down at the bottom. For the first 5 minutes, once the lecture starts, you can say your hellos, how people like to do, but please, after about 5 minutes, please reserve the chat room for questions, because I have to go through the questions to ask Sheahan. And there will be 3 sections to this lecture, and we will ask questions between each section. So I will be reviewing the questions and answering those. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sheahan Stephen, who is a Sapphire dealer. He was born in the US, but is a Sri Lankan. His parents are, he's lived in Sri Lanka. And Sheahan prides himself on truly working with the miners, the heaters, the cutters, to bring transparency and chain of custody to his booth in Tucson or to wherever you may go. And tonight he's going to talk about how Sri Lanka is handling this virus situation, but he's also going to talk about the very difficult process of chain of custody, because let's face it, nobody sleeps with those gemstones. Do you really know what happens to them at night? It's not as easy as everybody thinks, having transparency, having chain of custody, all the buzzwords that are happening right now. And Sheahan is going to talk about how difficult it is, what he does for the miners. Our chapter actually has helped Sheahan build a library that he's created, an educational library over in Sri Lanka, what he's doing to make sure that there's a give back from the trade to the miners. Anyway, this is the real story. And without further ado, Sheahan will share his screen, and I will be muting you all, and I'll talk to you between sessions.
Thank you, Starla.
Oh.
Can everyone see my screen all right? Yes. Okay. Thank you. As Starla mentioned, I've been in the, I was actually born in Sri Lanka, and my family and I moved here to the US in 1982. And I got into the gem trade in 2006. And I think the connection to Sri Lanka really was important to me because that took me back to my roots. And it was a way for me to really help give back to the country that I was born in. Sri Lanka, it is and has been a war-torn country for, at least 30 years. And this industry I found to be a good way to bring everyone together for a common cause. Education is extremely important in Sri Lankan culture. So, between being able to take care of their families, live a better life, and help raise the level of education for their children, I found that this was probably the best way for me to give back to the local community. So let's just get started. So the title of this presentation is Sapphire's Transparency in the Supply Chain. And to get started here, I'm just going to really quickly, about the first 20 minutes or so, we're going to be going over a few slides. So everyone really has a good idea of where the state of the gemstone industry stands right now. Sri Lanka will really give us all a good idea. It's, I would say, only second to Thailand as far as the amount of material that's processed. But the area that I will be speaking on initially is how the supply chain has become segmented, meaning it's basically turned into a free-for-all, where it was kind of the flow of product was going from mine to market or mine to retailer in a very structured manner. And that structure is really broken down. The second topic that I'll hit on here is the B2B model is being scrapped to sell directly to the end user. And that's from source countries directly to the end user. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of what's occurring there, but the importance of trying to bring, again, structure back to the supply chain so the flow of product flows in a more ethical manner. Ethical meaning there are too many nuts and bolts that can be taken advantage of when you're selling from a source country directly to the end consumer. And anybody who's in the gemstone industry of things really has a pretty clear understanding of how complex it is. So we'll get into that and how to rectify the current supply chain issues. And I always will welcome questions because it's very hard for me to answer everything or come up with the questions and answer them. So I welcome questions at the end of each section. This presentation, there are going to be two sections. So when we get to that point, Starla will field the questions and I'll go ahead and answer them for you. So moving on, we're going to start with a quick video of what's taking place. So segmented supply chain, cause and effect. Currently, Sri Lanka is roughly at about 20% of its full capacity. This is at the discretion of the mine owners, the miners, along with governmental COVID related protocol. So for example, there was a curfew in Sri Lanka at the beginning of COVID. I think that we're going back to March, and it literally lasted 8 weeks, where there was a 24-hour per day curfew in place between March and May. You know, even if it was groceries or if it was anything food related, where everything was people who lived there basically had to find another method to get their food delivered to their home, such as Uber Eats. So there are methods in place, but the government was very strict in the protocols that were followed to avoid more rapid spread of COVID. And this should be taken into consideration when we look at where the industry is right now in a source country like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, at any given time, since I can remember, going back to roughly 2010 or back, they release about 5,500 mining licenses annually. And this is by the National Gem and Jewelry Authority, which is overseen by the Ministry of Natural Resources. Just to give you a quick idea, I will discuss the captioning, but also give you an idea of what's taking place in the image here. And right here, Sri Lanka is known for its alluvial deposits, basically water-based. And so this is one of the methods that's used where using a generator, water is pumped from a pit into a secondary pit above ground, and then they use a panning method to filter the rough material. And then once they have panned maybe 15 or sometimes 20 pans full of rough, someone on site will go through and sort it and determine how much of that is actually usable material. So currently, 0 operational river mines. Typically, it's not something that the government has been fond of, mainly because it has a higher environmental impact. 0 operational mechanical mines as well. This is where heavy equipment is used. And there are roughly 1,100 operational pit mines. So again, about 20%. But keep in mind, there's going to be a small percentage of that of the mines that are not operating, which is at the discretion of the mine owner and the miners that work that mine. Sorry. Sri Lanka is an important global gemstone trading hub, second to Bangkok or second to Thailand, due to its high volume of skilled cutters and treaters. So one example is that a lot of rough material comes into Sri Lanka from Madagascar, Tanzania, Nigeria, Afghanistan, and it has been negligible since March. To my knowledge, I so far only know of about 10, maybe 12 dealers who have been able to bring product into the country. And I would say a major portion of what hits the domestic market is disclosed as foreign or local, but also it's important for the local market to have that because it's able to provide jobs, both in the cutting sector and treatment. Currently, the B2B model is being scrapped in order to sell as closely to the end user as possible. Historically, gems will move from the mine onward in an organized sequence. Mine to local dealer or to cutter, and then off to treater, and then foreign merchants, domestic dealers, meaning dealers here within the US, and then finally onto the consumer. And this is one of the issues that we're starting to see right now, is that that historically well-known dealers who are buying from the mines locally in Sri Lanka top grade material. They're developing their own presence online, which is 100% their right. But a lot of our industry is based on trust and longstanding relationships. And these dealers, because of the predicament that the country is in financially, they're willing to skip steps, chain or jump through the chain of custody to supply directly to the end user. And this is something that could be of concern to us here in the West, because it's going to eventually, what I've been hearing is that it's pushing the local wholesale market to do the same, to go straight to the consumer. Local dealers who have historically sold strictly to foreign merchants are now offering free shipping and accepting returns globally. Again, these are very well-established outlets, but the fact that globalization to some extent is great, but on the other end, when we've had a structured chain of custody going back thousands of years where, you know, the miners would pass it off to the local dealers, and the dealers would pass it off to merchants who would bring it to the West. There's a reason that it has worked so effectively over thousands of years. So my belief is that structure has stayed the way it has for a reason, and jumping steps might be effective momentarily, but I don't believe that method is sustainable long. And eventually, what we do want to provide is sustainability across all sectors of the industry. We want it to last as long as possible. And what we're looking at here in this picture is one of many. I would say that there are in Sri Lanka, over 10 rough trading markets, and this is one of them in the Ratnapura city itself. One new thing that I've been hearing is that local dealers in Sri Lanka are encouraging foreign merchants to stay at home, and that they would like to make it more convenient by bringing the cut and polished gemstones to us in the U.S. And the key to this is, for me as a foreign merchant going to Sri Lanka, it's educational for me, and it's a way of me educating the back end, meaning source country, but also it's the way of me bringing educational content to the front end and educating all of you as well. Education is the key to improving the industry, just like what GIA does, building a foundation. But without the use of, without field gemology, we're not able to continue to improve the method in which things are done. That could be just mining, heat treatment, or any sort of treatment for that matter. But that flow of product, flow of information needs to stay in place so that we're able to educate each other. The pandemic has also taught dealers, both in the front end and in the back, that we can work less and earn more if we're able to jump steps. So it could be an American dealer wanting to sell directly to the end consumer, or it could be a Sri Lankan dealer in Sri Lanka selling directly to a end consumer in the US, which is great, but I'm not convinced that the earning ability or the quality of life of those downstream, down the supply chain will improve with this mentality. Meaning, if the dealer might have better communication skills to be able to sell to the West, but it doesn't mean that the miner is going to benefit from it. If anything, the foreign influence helped improve things. For example, just being able to educate them with the concepts and the ideas that we learned here or that I have learned here will, and my ability to have interactions with the miners, with the other dealers, rough dealers, cutters, the entire back end supply chain. If we continue down this road, the validation process will be lost. International merchants hold source countries to a higher standard, meaning we have our background, we know what the front end customer is looking for. There's much less trial and error, and we're able to take those protocols and those what we have learned here and to raise the quality standards there, to improve their efficiencies in how they work and improve their efficiency in how they mine and bring better awareness to safety and safety protocols, which we appreciate in the US and we would like to see implemented. But also I think something that I will get into further as we go through this presentation, but also something that needs to be taken into consideration is the cultural aspect of how things are done in Sri Lanka or in other mining regions throughout the world. One important aspect is, for example, safety regulations are important to be put in place, but also, so for example, it could be something as simple as shoes. You know, miners do not, they all work barefoot. And wearing shoes, whether they're, you know, steel toe or they're waterproof, it's something that they're uncomfortable working in. And when we're talking about working in waters that are ankle deep or even higher, it just means it could cause infection. This is just one very basic foundation that that I'm trying to share. But the point is that what we know here doesn't necessarily transfer or convert over into what would be applicable in a source country. And I think sometimes us pushing what we believe needs to be done is not very effective. So my point, you know, using boots, they would have a much higher chance of falling to their death or causing an infection when they're sitting in a pit, you know, upwards of 2 to 4 hours at a time. So hopefully that makes sense. How do we rectify supply chain issues? Again, education is the key, and experience. I think our experiences that we learn here, we just continue to pass it on. And similar to what I'm doing, where I'm educated in both in the West and in the East, and I'm able to share that information back and forth, essentially, at the end of the day, to improve the supply chain and improve the industry. So on the front end, educating customers about the complexities of buying colored gemstones is important. And I think that's something that can be done on the retail end, especially through globalization and you know, the internet and the ability to research and find information. Sometimes it doesn't apply. And I think any of us here who have spent time in the industry, in theory, or just working with gemstones knows the complexity behind all the factors that would go into evaluating a stone and bringing that all the evaluation to a delta, which is price. And I'll give you guys a funny story. I mean, about a year ago, I had someone give me a call. They had worked with the U.S. State Department. They were stationed in Sri Lanka, or yeah, they were stationed in Sri Lanka for a number of years. And over that time, they acquired a few sapphires. And I think they acquired it towards the end of their stay there. So he called me up and he said they're just not very happy with their purchase there. And this is, keep in mind, this is something that they're physically looking at. They're not happy with their purchase, and they asked me if I could return it for them. You know, which is absolutely absurd. Now, if you take someone who's outside of the industry physically looking at stones at a source country or in a source country, and they want to return it literally 6 months or 8 months later, imagine trying to make those purchases sight unseen, just through pictures or videos, which can be enhanced. And then we have to determine what level of enhancement is taking place. That alone takes an expert level to identify. So really important moving forward that we educate both, not just the back end source countries, but we educate the front end on the difficulties of grading and judging colored stones. Essentially, we just call it remotely. Yeah, to finally on this slide, the evaluation of gems is sensory. Our brains quantify multiple factors to come to a delta, which is price. So, and that takes years and years and years of experience, thousands of hours, I would say. Moving on, in a typical year, I import 4 to 5 shipments. This year, 2020, last year, this was reduced down to 2 shipments. All stones were purchased without physically seeing the gems in person. And what I realized once the shipment came in, basically, I was not very happy with the quality of product because we were purchasing them, or I was purchasing them without physically seeing them, based on images, based on videos. But even if it's unintentional, as the seller, you're always going to be looking at ideal light conditions, ideal conditions to sell the product. And even with, I would say over 20,000 hours in this industry, which is double the number of hours for expertise, I was still, I wouldn't say taken for a ride, but I would say I was not able to accurately evaluate the stones. And I took comfort in knowing that I helped support the community still, which was okay. But I also see, and this is, my last shipment just came in 3 weeks ago. I accepted that as being okay because this is another educational experience that I'm able to share with you all. And hopefully this can be passed on to your customers and encouraged to follow some level of redundancy before making a purchase. That can be, like I said, there are some bigger dealers in Sri Lanka who will accept returns, but they don't know who can be trusted in that sense and who can't. And I think it takes many, many years just on that level to be able to build that trust with a foreign supplier. Like I hit on this just a second ago, familiar with the 10,000 hour rule. I put in over 20,000 hours over 14 years and still unable to accurately judge color via webcam and pictures. We quantify on a much higher scale. Educating the end user or our customers should be imperative to help them understand the difficulty behind making a high value purchase without physically seeing the product. One other thing I can add on this subject is that there is some legal recourse within the US if a business, or let's say a dealer or a supplier sells to an end consumer because of the legal system. The consumer would obviously have to go through some form of verifying that it is a legitimate business. But the minute you go overseas, that's out the window. And you can buy directly from a miner who can describe the stone to you however you like, and you make that call and you might never get your money back. So these are things that are important in making those decisions. And again, education is key. Every step as we move forward, education is key to bring continuity back to the supply chain. My personal goal in source countries moving forward is to help educate, not just in Sri Lanka, but in East Africa and Southeast Asia. This will help improve the protocols that are followed in mining and treatment. My background is not in cutting, but definitely helping improve those protocols and make the supply chain more efficient, and also helping make these transactions more ethical. So pictured here are a group of miners from a mine that I have worked very closely with, I would say over the last 4.5 years in Sri Lanka in the Ratnapura district. So here are a few questions that I've been asked here over the last week. How has Sapphire sales been in the past year? And I'm really actually quite pleased. I feel like I have made the business more efficient. I believe in the conversations that were going on earlier before the start of the presentation, someone mentioned that I think it was Suzanne mentioned, continuing the by appointment only model or strategy. So that's basically one thing that I implemented here is it's by appointment only, even if it's to a wholesale customer, because I'm more efficient with my time. I can spend the necessary time. I can schedule the appointments and make sure that I spend the necessary time with the customer to educate them. And eventually my goal is to sell by educating the customer. And then I feel like there is some level of a guarantee that they're competent in their purchase, and I wouldn't have any concern over. You could even say a high return rate. I believe that this method tends to have a higher sell-through rate, where you educate and you sell. So to be direct, yeah, the 2020 has been solid for my company. And it's just because we have made the correct adjustments to continue to be highly efficient and continue to move product. The only concern is, again, supply chain issues where we are able to sell the product, but also replace it. And that's where, continuity in this supply chain is important. How are you working in the new COVID-19 era environment to source stones? This is what this first section is about, and it's actually very challenging to be able to source correctly without being able to enter a source country. Sri Lanka's borders were shut down from March, and they just reopened last Thursday. I'm resistant to go back there anytime soon until I start seeing, the effectivity of the vaccine, along with, what direction is the virus going in here locally in the U.S. as well as in Sri Lanka. So if things continue in a upward trajectory in regard to less, let's say a downward trajectory in the number of infection rates, I would definitely consider going back within the next 3-4 months. On that topic, this is the first time since 2006 that I haven't gone to Sri Lanka in 1 year. So definitely taught me a new way of trying to manage the business. What are you anticipating in terms of Sapphire demand, sales, and prices for 21? Again, completely, it's 50-50. Obviously, it depends on the direction of the front end because it is demand driven to a large extent. But supply and demand go hand in hand, and if we are not able to bring continuity to the supply chain, you're going to see a rise in prices. Definitely. I would to simplify the change in price. Let's hypothetically break down the quality of stones, grading hue, tone, saturation, and clarity on a 1 to 10 scale. The top 20% is going to probably see anywhere from a 3 to 6 or 7% pricing increase if all things stay equal. But the mid sector is where I'm saying, let's say 7 down. They're 7 to 4, grade 4 to 7. I'm seeing a reduction or lower pricing, and then certainly even lower when we're looking at that 1 to 3 grade. So to be very direct, if the supply chain issues are not corrected relatively quickly, even the mid grade and the lower grade material is going to spike in price. One thing that I did want to hit on here in closing this section is that I have recently got a close industry friend of mine who I actually believe is an artist in his own right, as far as the quality of workmanship and just the intrinsic value in the jewelry that he makes. And he just basically asked me, Sheahan, there are people in Sri Lanka specifically stealing his images and using them on their Instagram or Facebook platforms. Can you do something? It just happens that I have an office in the city that this person is operating from, so I'm able to help him out. But I think when we look at the big picture, this is going to become more and more of an issue because of globalization and because of the segmented supply chain. If source countries, if suppliers, if miners feel that they're able to sell directly to the consumer, of course they're going to go to whatever extent they can. If that means stealing images to deceive the consumer, like I said, if there's no return policy that's enforceable, they get your money and that's it. So this is another thing to keep in mind, and another reason to try to bring some level of normalcy to the supply chain and try to get as close to where things were pre-COVID, along with some improvements to make the process more ethical, more transparent, and ethical practices are important. So with that, Starla, if there are any questions, I'd like to take those right now.
One question is, what marketing platform are the dealers, the miners using to get to the ultimate consumer?
Yeah, I'm finding that this is all Instagram, number one. Number two is going to be Facebook.
When the government shut down with the curfew, how did the miners survive? Do most of them have some type of nest egg, or did the government offer support?
There was very little available. Sri Lankan, the culture is such that that the people learn to depend on each other. So that could be on a family or friends level. Money is important, but it's not. So, most people are more than willing to help each other out just to get through the difficult times. Like I said, the country's been, and did go through a 30-year civil war. So if anyone knows how to struggle, those guys do, and survive.
How much notice did the government give before they had the curfew?
From my knowledge, it was very quick. I would say less than a week. And from all of the contacts that I've had, and I've been in constant contact with the suppliers and the miners and the mine owners that have supplied me over the years, yeah, they just said it was very quick and it was very difficult to adjust. But probably one of the few upsides they found was the country life was a little bit better, out in rural Ratnapura, central Sri Lanka, versus the more urbanized urban areas. I mean, we could look at it similarly to, the Bay Area or Los Angeles or New York, where the pandemic, when it hit, the highly concentrated areas were hit hard. Same thing for Sri Lanka. The major urban area, there's only one really major urban area, which is going to be Colombo. But there were some other issues in north central area, but Colombo was primarily hit. And I can't say to what extent, because there was a drastic change in numbers as far as number of deaths and number of cases up until the middle of August. And all of a sudden, you could say there was probably a 1,000% increase. So I'm not sure how much of that was political, because there were elections in the middle of all this. Governmental elections, the presidential elections were completed last February, I think it was 19 November, but the governmental elections were midsummer, and I strongly believe that a lot of that was the hiding the numbers was politically driven. So, like I said, past when we look at the major spike going from like 3,000 cases to 50,000 in a month, that's a drastic jump.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Does the government do anything from a health standpoint to help educate the miners about things like infections or open wounds on their feet, or how to care?
This is a good question. So this is like the basic foundational education that I'm trying to provide. Just from spending time on the ground. I'll give you guys one example. There was a very, very nice mining, it's minor, small scale, very, very small scale, literally 3-4 guys that work a pit. And he came to me and he just said, "Sir, look, I need heart surgery, but the government is not willing to allow." Basically, it's a socialized medicine system there. And the doctors have rejected him for the procedure because he's a heavy drinker and he smokes. And they will prioritize people who have tried their best to take care of themselves. So to answer the question, the government will do a little bit of hand holding, but it's more less hand holding and more a slap on the wrist. And hey, here's your punishment. So typically nothing is done on that level until there's been an infection. Not educational, but hey, change what you're doing, because if you knew better, you won't have an infection because you're living a healthier life.
How are the large international jewelry houses purchasing stones from Sri Lanka nowadays?
There's been actually this has been directly hit with me for the production orders that I've had. Everything was frozen, and there are going to be actually, I mean, this might be just good information for everyone to know, but in certain, like the Swiss watch industry, any production that has a 2020 production date, it's going to be valuable. Because there was very little produced in 2020. And so we're hoping to see manufacturing improve, but everything was frozen in 2020. Well, I'd say for about 8 months of the year. And there was a major backlog. And I think that's where it comes down to your relationships. I am a big believer of, regardless of your financial status, as far as your business goes, if you build strong relationships, you can get through thick and thin, no matter what you're faced with. And this is a once in a lifetime event that took place. This is applicable to the front end, here in the West, in America and Europe, where if we've built strong relationships and they're long-standing, people will step up and be forgiving and give time. I think some of the productions that I run are high value, and definitely more than I would want to hold on to for more than for a year or 2 years. So making sure that that movement is there, but for the sake of one, maintaining the relationship with the manufacturer, and then number two, leaning on the relationships that I have in the source countries. We just all kind of come together to continue.
And how often do you think how often does the end consumer actually think about miners and their livelihoods? This is what everybody's trying to do with the transparency, is you want to think down the channel. Do you really feel this is working?
I believe it does, but I think sometimes it's important that the retailer who's selling the product to the consumer is able to one, engage them on it's basically sustainability is an all-encompassing word of transparency, ethics, and education. But it's really important that we educate the consumer in a manner that they also understand, outside of just making the sale. Here's what's realistic. Here's what's realistic. And we try to educate, because education is the way to actually make environmental changes. It's the human beings that are impacting the planet the most. And so it's not the trees that are impacting the planet, it's the people. So if we start at a grassroots level by teaching good nutrition, good finance, understanding, clean water, shelter, that's the basis of and the fundamentals of sustainability in my mind. And that will transfer over into better practices. So to answer that question, yeah, I think it's important that, like, for example, that the consumer understands that, look, in certain cases, no, because the mining conditions are wet, they're not able to wear shoes. I've climbed into a mine myself. There's no way, with all the mines that I've been in Sri Lanka, which are pit, which again, that makes up almost all of them, that you would ever want to wear shoes. It's just going to make the situation worse. It's going to make you more uncomfortable and make you less efficient at doing your job. Some of the mines, especially after the rainy season, some of the pits, they'll pump out the water and you're walking around in waist-high water still. So it's just educating them on the realities of what the miners are faced with, but also what they're comfortable doing. We're not looking to change their comfort level, but we're looking to improve the safety to an extent. It's always, we're making these fine lines, Starla. And I think we need to just make sure that we keep it there, not looking for night and day changes.
Okay, so the miner is, so what value is going to be offered to the miners, the cutters, and the heaters, so that they no longer feel that they have to go to the end consumer to make the money? It's sort of like, is there like this benevolent dictator, as Dick Hughes says a lot of countries need, that say, we will take care of you down the line, but we need this process to continue on in an orderly way? They've obviously created a secondary route to the end consumer, and feel like they're making the money. If money's not that important, I get it. But if it is, how do you stop the change?
And it isn't. That's the funny part about this. So also, there are no shortcuts to success. That's where I would lay the foundation. And I think if you're looking for a shortcut, that's what they're trying to do. And one thing is, it's the entire thing, it's mental. You take too good of care, they're going to take advantage. So it's always finding that fine line. And so I'll tell you, like, very frankly, the cutters who work for me are paid 3 times standard wage, but they're also able to cut to our standard here, what we're looking for here. there's no profitability in it for me as a business owner, a for-profit business, if they're going to give me native cut stones with a crooked hewlett, and I'm paying them the same wage, the 3 times standard. So it's a balancing act there. So one thing that I look for personally is that they are all experts in their area, but maintaining that, or I train and train and train. My master cutter in Sri Lanka out of the Ratnapura office, exceptional cutter, and I would never have any doubt in his abilities. And if there, because we run these productions, if I start seeing a lapse in quality, it's only one thing: he's getting lazy. That's it. Because I know the standard, and over time, I mean, we gain experience. So there's no way that a cutter's cut quality reduces over time. It's only going to get better. And we're talking about, a middle-aged man in his late 40s. He's in his prime. So those are factors that I start looking for when it comes down to the ethics, transparency, sustainability aspect. Yeah, I mean, I will definitely financially take care of the employee, but at the same time, they need to be able to give me their best, because it's not a bilateral relationship between employer and employee if I pay them those sort of wages and they give me inferior quality goods.
Okay, that's the end of the questions for this section, so we can move on.
Okay. So the next few slides and videos are going to be focusing on building a transparent chain of custody. Key subtopics: vertical integration, model, mining, heating, heat treating, and cutting and distribution. Fully transparent. Human aspect is very important. So these are the primary focus on the next few slides. And we're going to start with the video.
I don't have any sound on this. Does anybody else have sound?
No, actually, this is Mike Coyle from GIA. Hey, Sheahan, can you do me a quick favor? Because we can't hear the audio. Can you stop sharing for just a second and then reshare, and then just make sure that you have the checkbox where it says optimize for video, and try it again? I don't know if you heard that.
Sheahan, is there audio on this video?
Sorry?
Is there audio on this video?
Yes.
We can't hear it.
Oh,
So
you can't
there,
hear it.
no. So Mike is asking you to pause your video, stop sharing your screen. And there was one other something about
Yeah, so when you when you reshare your screen, there should be like a little checkbox that says optimize for video sharing, and then give that a shot.
Okay. So optimize. Where do I find that?
Usually like right when you're about to start sharing, there should be an option for, it says like, there's usually like a little checkbox that says something on the lines of optimize for video sharing. If you don't see it, then maybe it's not enabled. But what that does is it sends the sound from the video to all the viewers. So if you're not seeing it, then
Optimize for video clip. Yes.
oh, you do see it? Okay, cool. All right, so give it another shot and let's see if it works.
Okay.
The first step of the mining process requires them to cut wood. In this case, they're using rubber.
Okay. Thank you. I'll restart this.
Tree wood for the mine shaft. I'm here at the first step in my chain of custody at a pit mine in Ratnapur, Sri Lanka. This pit is roughly 60 feet deep, and it's been worked for a couple of years at this point. The sustainability aspect of this mine revolves around them growing their own vegetables and hunting for wild boar. Another aspect in the sustainable model here is that the miners actually get a 15-minute break every hour where they get to rejuvenate by having a meal. The first step of the mining process requires them to cut wood. In this case, they're using rubber tree wood for the mine shaft. While we were on site here over the last 2 hours, the miners were able to extract a roughly 3-carat rough, which will be faceted into a 2 to 1.5 carat cut and polished stone. Saranga here is the mine owner, and we came to terms on a price, and it has been sold to me on site.
So moving forward, the foundation of sustainability. We're going to look at environmental. And this starts with, like I said earlier, starts with the human beings, giving them a foundation as far as for their livelihood, for them and their families. Families huge in Asian culture. It's huge. I mean, it's not just there; it's global. But like I said, because especially in Sri Lanka, there's been so many years of struggle. They've always learned to count on each other, and it, in one way or another, during difficult times, it makes the family unit stronger. So building that foundation definitely will help the sustainability vision, and eventually it trickles down to improving the environment. Second, if we educate them in sustainable manner on how to take care of themselves, in that process, the environmental factors will start to be considered. That's so it's getting a little bit redundant, but as you can see, I keep focusing on taking care of the humans first, because it does definitely trickle down to the environment, and especially all the environmentalists and everybody whose primary concern is the environment. it should make sense that if we don't make the improvement on the human end, the environmental issues will always be there, and they will most likely never improve on their own. The foundation, like I said, the foundation on a human level is extremely important. Teaching them proper nutrition, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm no one to dictate, you know, how anything has to be, but this just makes sense, you know, that we build a strong foundation. We teach them foundational things on nutrition, on health, on home, on education, and this is just a way on finance. I think one of the newest steps that I've taken in the last couple of years is getting them used to being paid once a month, whereas before, you know, they completed a job. If that's completed in 3 days, they want to be paid immediately, and it's nice, but it's not realistic. In the real world, you know, we build that structure of biweekly or monthly paychecks, and these are foundational issues where they learn to budget and manage their expenditures accordingly. Training and educating the parents, because if you're able to change their lives, it will generally impact the children's life. I'm going to remove the word generally from this. It will impact the children's lives. And so the important part is trying to help the parent see it's not that they want to improve their lives. The parent wants to improve their lives, and that way they're able to pass that thinking on to their children. And this will turn into more long-term generational sustainability. Again, I've been teaching them for many years about how to negotiate, and this is also a part of learning how to properly quantify what the product is. Give me an educated offer. So versus I've brought this up with maybe a couple of you before, but I've had a very prominent miner come to my office, and literally he will come in with a kg, you know, 2.5 pounds of rough, and one part of our model is we evaluate every single stone, and this is how we're able to give guarantees, and this is also a part of our sustainable model. And in transparencies, we guarantee every stone, we verify the source, we verify the owners and the mining method. But this being said, the miner brought literally maybe 2.5 pounds of sapphire rough to the office. And one technique that's commonly used in Sri Lanka in negotiating is they throw out an arbitrary number because they literally do not know what the product is worth. They're not spending enough time, especially on an ownership level. He's not spending enough time understanding the ins and outs of the product that they have. So they depend on the buyer to throw out a number, and they essentially ask double. And with this specific person, he came to my office. I gave him an example. You know, he was wearing a Rolex, so obviously he knows the brand. And I told him, look, you can't go into a store and say, hey, I'm only going to pay you half. You know, so I told him, you can sit there. He sat in my office for 7 hours with the rough, and I told him I will make one counter offer. Just make it close. One counter. And I think anybody who's known me in Sri Lanka knows that I can be a very difficult or tough negotiator. But I respect and I value people who come to the negotiating table with good information and are fair and reasonable in their offers. So at the end of the day, every minute that I spend on the ground there is spent teaching. And I think that's pretty much the point of that story is it doesn't matter where along the supply chain you stand. education is key, so that you're able to negotiate with the best and continue to develop more relationships in a similar manner. Sustainability is imposed by the government first. So on that note, when mining occurs or when mining licenses are given out, I would say a solid 80 to 85% of the mines that are operational are owned by the government. The land is owned by the government, but they're basically leased in auction style. So depending on the location, depending on multiple factors, but the primary is going to be the location. The government will hold multiple auctions per year of the land, and typically the auction is for 2 years. And they will actually take a deposit to make sure and confirm that the mine is shut down properly. Meaning, if it's a pit that's 25 feet deep, that the pit is actually closed with soil and dirt, so that doesn't cause any environmental impact. So yeah, the government does have protocols in place that should be followed, and I think sometimes when we're looking at countries that have a historical mining or a history of mining, that's where we can help educate newer sources on effective procedures that on a governmental level and also on a mining level. So the next video I have for you is on the rough trade.
I'm standing in the rough gem market at Nivitigilla, Sri Lanka. Nivitigilla has historically been one of the largest gem trading localities in the world, where miners from this region will bring their rough from previous days to this location for trading with dealers and cutters. This is one of the typical identifying factors for Gyoda. This specific piece has a color concentration which is identified as Urtu. Nivitigilla is typically the second location that gemstones in Sri Lanka travel to. So from a chain of custody, when it moves from the mine, it's going to go to the Nivitigilla trading market. Once it's procured here, it moves off to my office for heat treatment, and then onward for cutting.
So the next portion, or the next slide, we're going to focus on the importance of the human aspect. Support my own country, that's one, and really understanding the culture. And I grew up in that culture, so it made it a little bit easier as far as my own personal understanding. But again, supporting the country that I was born in was important. And the intrinsic value of just doing that. Supporting the U.S. in areas of need, example, the homeless, and education for underprivileged children. I think these are where friction comes in, and if we're able to make meaningful changes in areas of need, the intrinsic value in that is unquantifiable. That's how I would put that. If I can help improve the lives of human beings, that's going to turn sustainability on a human front. I've been able to help establish a gemstone library and hoping to establish a laboratory in Sri Lanka to engage student learners of gemology and to further progress ethical sourcing and trade of gemstones. I mean, these are all areas which, on multiple levels are taking place already, but the goal is to try to improve education again in all of these areas. The need is not just in Sri Lanka, the need is global. And I think anytime we come in with an expertise and we've succeeded, I think being able to pass that on is equally important as how we got there. So hopefully that makes sense to all of you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me at the end.
Second stage of custody, once the sapphires are mined, are in my office, where we're able to control each process as they move on from mining, heating, and cutting. All of the rough that enters the office is either from Sri Lanka or Madagascar.
I think the question to here is how important is the transparent chain of custody? How important is transparency to your heart? This model isn't for every jeweler out there. The key is sustainable, long-term. That could be on the human end, it could be on in the environmental end, but regardless, if the model is important to you personally, the profitability of the business doesn't, you want to make a profitable business so you can continue to support the model. Closed loop, transparent on all knowledge on the process. Know the details to offer your customer and for your own tracking and identification. So I think these are all self-explanatory points and why transparency and sustainability are important. And again, if you have further questions, please ask.
Before we begin the heating process, we have to determine which type of gouda we're going to be treating. Depending on the type, the time and the temperature can vary anywhere from 1500 centigrade up to 1950, or anywhere between 4 hours and 6 to 7 hours. Chain of custody is especially important during the heating process to ensure to our customers that there are no residual chemicals, either beryllium or titanium, used during the heating process. with master blowpipe burner Babu. Babu has been burning sapphires using this method for over 47 years. The typical temperature range is between 500 and 700 degrees centigrade, and it is used to reduce color in sapphire.
The next topic I'm going to speak on here shortly is unification. So, and this isn't, again, this isn't just in Sri Lanka, but any multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious country. We're able to use our expertise and education to change the way people think. And like I said, the foundation in Sri Lanka is family, and it is to typically most Sri Lankans that I have worked with or gotten to know, they want to improve their life. They want to improve it for their children, for their families, immediate and extended. And so, looking past religion, looking past race to make their lives better. I've seen it over and over again, just even in my office. When I have Tamils, Muslims, and Sinhalese all walk in at the same time, where there have been in the past, for one reason or another, it could have been the Civil War or other issues. They outside of the trade, the groups have a hard time working together. Again, this goes back to friction. You spend time with a progressive thinking person, it ends up being frictional. And if you spend enough time with them, some parts of their thinking will rub off on you, and some part of yours will rub off on them. And the goal is to have a positive, healthy impact. So again, returning back to the unification part, the three groups essentially have to work together in harmony to improve their lives. And that is the bottom line for them, is to improve their lives. More than just money motivated. 30 years of civil war fractured these groups. Bringing these groups together through my business is extremely important. Navigating through the government BS, this is always an issue because we're trying to get to the root cause of whatever the problems are. And is the government making that better, or is it making it worse? And I've never had an issue with opposing the government, even if that was to cause me a problem personally. In business and education, hopefully we're able to improve both of those aspects. If we plant the seed now, it's going to continue to grow. Long-term sustainability. Mining, treating, cutting is all tribal knowledge that is passed down to the next generation. Especially when we're looking at heaters and miners, I could say that it tends to be a generational profession. For newer sources such as Africa, it doesn't necessarily, the East Africa region doesn't have the history where mining has been taking place for thousands of years. So the what's taking place in Sri Lanka, I can speak for, is that especially with the miners and the treaters, these jobs, especially when you saw Babu with the blowpipe, that those jobs are generational, and techniques are taught from father to son, especially on the heating end. I haven't really seen too many females involved on the heat treating side. Not to say that it shouldn't be more in Sri Lanka, but I just haven't. But again, generational information, which isn't typically shared. A lot of trial and error goes into treatment. So they tend to keep it very proprietary and unwilling to share we could just say it as profits and losses of learning.
The next step in my transparent chain of custody is my cutting operation here in Ratnapura, Sri Lanka. Welcome to my lapidary here in Ratnapura, Sri Lanka, a continuation of my transparent chain of custody. This is typically the third step in the process, where we employ 2 husband and wife teams as well as 3 female facetors.
So my final thoughts and questions, the important or ethical and sustainable trade organizations. I think if you guys are all familiar, there's a number of them out there. And I believe that our industry is multifaceted in what each segment brings to the table. So do your research. I think that's key, but also don't lose sight of the education that institutions such as GIA bring, and your personal experience hands-on. So taking the theory with the practical experience that we have, or bringing in a trade organization, and never forget how important it is to at least once in your lifetime visit a source country so you understand and you're able to pass that education on to your customer. You're able to understand the supply chain, you're able to understand each segment, whether it's mining, heating, cutting, and then you understand the distribution. When we're all able to comprehend, it makes what you do a lot simpler, and you're able to disclose that to your customers with a lot more confidence. Next thing I'd like to emphasize on is the importance of redundancy. My production is highly redundant, and we don't leave any room for any sort of failure. The production was actually put together. I put all of the productions together individually, but we used I chose to use the Boeing model because it is life and death. But the minute you enter an airplane and the aircraft takes flight, you're at the mercy of, 1, the pilot, and number 2, the aircraft. And so Boeing put together typically a highly redundant system. If we look at the last 2 major crashes with the Boeing 737X MAX, it's because the communication and the redundancy dropped between pilot and engineer. So having a highly redundant production minimizes my failure, and in delivering the quality and the standard to the customer. The validation process, extremely important to be able to validate and be redundant. So look for the steps that your suppliers are using to validate the product. It can't be, okay, I'm just going to only use my experience, look at it under a microscope, done. No, we have to use the laboratory, we use our senses, and we use the contacts that we've developed. So in my case, validation comes through the miners that I've known for 5, 10, 15 years. Some of the guys I've known for minimum 12 years. Do I put a high level of trust? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's a combination of all the factors, meaning my experience put together with my relationship with the miners or the relationship with the treaters, put together with laboratory services in Sri Lanka, and again, laboratory services that are available in the US. So again, reverting back to building a highly redundant process, which eventually will not have a failure. And then personal verification by the customer. So for me, my customers are most of you, who own a business. And so the customer is going to be able to use their knowledge and their background as the final step to verify, that the product meets their standards. So with that, and the presentation. Again, Sheahan Stephen. You can find my address, phone number, email, and please follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn to get regular updates on what's taking place in the industry. We are really moving more and more towards even educational posts. I think typically what I've seen is most of the posts are just really heavily sales driven by dealers. But again, reverting to sales through education. I think that is a redundant term right there, because highly unlikely that if we educate the customer, it's highly unlikely they're going to be unhappy with the product. Thank you.
Okay, Sheahan, I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
So the first one has to do with rough. And the question is, there's three. Number one, that 2.5 pound bag of rough that they brought, how do you know it was all Sri Lankan? Number two, is that rough treated, heated before it comes to you? And number three, how do you know, what were you looking for in the Gouda stones with your light?
Yep. So, okay, Starla. So, if you wouldn't mind, just if you don't mind, I answer each question.
Oh, yeah, got that.
So could you just repeat them again?
Number one, how do you know that all the sapphires in that 2.5 pound lot were from Sri Lanka?
Okay. So one part of our network is in East Africa. So that the lot that came in was all green sapphire, roughly 1 kg. He tells me it's Madagascar material. We build strong relationships with certain miners. They're domestic in the relationship is based in Sri Lanka, but they're well known in Madagascar in partnering with the locals there. So how our partnership works is essentially we take financial responsibility sometimes for certain portions of the mining procedures that take place there. But again, we revert to redundancy. The supplier, or in this case, it would be a partner, tells us it's all Madagascar material. We have our relationship, then we go through our redundant process of verification. On a basic level, our validation and verification process is between three of us. I'm one of the three, and the other two are master cutters for my company. So we're looking for the same factors. There's certain characteristics, inclusion characteristics and color characteristics that come from each country. Can we say that with 100% certainty? No, not even a laboratory can do that. That's why there's always a disclaimer on a lab report. But the more redundancy that is put into our process, we feel that we can give a near 100% guarantee in the product just through the invoice, not even a lab report. Like I said, And then once we verify everything, we're looking for the same factors on color and clarity. As most of you probably understand, that each country, like for example, a green sapphire from Sri Lanka, typically does not look anything similar to a green sapphire from Madagascar in color and also in clarity. The types of inclusions that show up from Madagascar are very distinctive, and we can spot them relatively quickly. And then we just go on to another level of redundancy where if we have any question about the origin, we'll first use a laboratory in Sri Lanka. If this is sold to us as a lot and we're not able to reject without certainty, we'll bring it to the US, and then we'll use another lab service in the US. And so if we get verification at every step and everything is positive, we can move on with the transaction. But if there is any doubt and we get a report which does not meet our standard of verification, we hold the right to return the entire lot, even once it's cut and polished. I hope that makes sense to everyone.
Okay, so the next question is, does rough come to you already treated?
So we make a decision based on the color of the stone. My primary color is blue, and the secondary colors that I deal in and sell are green and peach. I'm pretty well known industry-wise for these three colors. Not to say that I don't carry yellow or purple or other colors, but based on the color, we will evaluate the rough and determine the shape, the clarity, and the need to be treated right off the bat when it comes to our office. With green sapphire, typically we will cut before it needs any treatment. A majority of our green sapphire purchases are unheated, but if we feel that we're going to be able to improve the color substantially, we're again quantifying. We're quantifying what is the value as an unheated stone versus a heated stone. How much is the color going to change versus not change? So in the colored gemstone market, color is primary. So if we can get a substantially better, let's say a 9 or a 10 on that 1 to 10 scale, we will heat it. But green sapphires don't fetch a premium heated versus unheated. It's pretty stable, maybe about 5% versus looking at blue. But shifting to blue sapphire, we've broken it down to 7 varieties of gouda, which is silky, milky, dum, ottu. They all have different clarity characteristics. And depending on the amount of that inclusion, it could be silk, it could be a color concentration. We will make an offer based on how we think. Let's say, for example, ottu is a color concentration. In the end, we're making estimations, and highly accurate estimations is the difference between profits and losses. So when ottu is heated, the color expands. We're looking at how much of the surface area of the stone needs to be cobbed off versus how much can we keep. And it's an estimation of how much that color is going to expand through the material. So yeah, that's the other factor that we're looking at with blue. And it runs similarly with peach. Again, we like to keep them unheated if possible. There is another, I'm not sure if you are all familiar with the fade test, but that is another issue that has popped up over the last few years where color dissipates under certain lighting and temperature conditions. So that's another factor we have to be aware of, and it can't be necessarily just evaluated with a torch and a loupe, but it would require a more advanced testing. So yeah, I hope that answers your question there, Starla.
Uh, Yes, so I guess the question relates to when you're in the market buying rough, how do you know if that rough is or isn't treated?
Yeah, so maybe this was not clear in the video. We typically do not make offers on rough at the market. It's just an initial contact with people and understanding the quality of product that they're carrying. So if let's say 1 or 2 miners at the market have something of interest, we have them bring it to the office, and then we do the evaluation in the office under our ideal conditions. Something as basic as temperature, meaning outdoor temperature, can affect our decision making. And if it's 90 degrees and 90% humidity, I do not want to make a decision based on those external conditions. So everything comes to the office. We're going to do a basic evaluation. If it meets our standard as heated or unheated or needs to be heated, we don't have any doubt about synthetic or any illicit treatment, then we will move forward. But like I said, over the years, I've able to develop a process at which at any point we realize that the treatment is not something that we accept, or it's a synthetic, we have the right to return it.
What is the clay that Babu wrapped the gemstone in when he was heating it?
The clay. I'm actually not sure. It's actually something that it's a method that he's used. It's sometimes in the heating process with a furnace, there's a flux that's used, but it would not impregnate the stone. So it's basically it would be removed. But I'm being honest with you. I'm not too sure about what the clay was. But that is a method that is done by the blowpipe heaters. I've seen a number of them use the same method, but yeah.
Yeah, to me, it was like a putty, but it never hardened the whole time the stone was heated.
Mhm.
The next question is, the low temperature blowpipe method, what are you improving? Because rutile doesn't melt until a far higher temperature.
Mhm.
So what does the blowpipe method improve?
The blowpipe method improves color only. So I think we're used to the traditional concept that an improvement in color means more color. But when we look at the Australian material and some of the Nigerian material, it's brought to us relatively a dark tone, so it reduces that color.
Okay. In your treatment process, you don't use any beryllium or titanium, correct?
No, but it is something that's why a very tight chain of custody is important, so that there is no residual from other treatments where the buyer wants that used, or the owner of the rough material wants to use beryllium or titanium. So the advantage of owning your own furnace and basically doing service heating, which is something also we offer to the American Sapphire market. The advantage is it's a very tight, secure chain of custody, and we don't have that concern. We own the the furnace, and there's just Mr. Dhanapala has been running my furnace for 10 years. So there's a history there as well. All important in a secure, tight chain of custody.
Just 2 more questions because we're getting on here. Is there much interest in the younger generation to continue on in the gem field?
Yeah, like I said earlier on, the mining and heat treatment sector is very much generational. Cutting, cutting was introduced to Sri Lanka in the late 80s. And, there was a government program that was introduced in the late 80s. And that's how Rosario, my master cutter over there, learned. He attended that program. And it really expanded outside of that. But I can't say I know too many, I know too many that are coming in from a generational aspect and want to carry on a cutting tradition, but definitely parents are teaching their kids heating methods, especially the older blowpipe methods, and those tend to continue, as well as mining. Versus, like I said, with newer sources, we don't really see that carrying over. With newer sources, I'm also seeing that that the miners might not necessarily stick to that industry for a very long time if they're really struggling. So,
Okay.
thinking about this.
Sorry. And then finally, how difficult would it be to set up a gem library, an educational facility? Would it be well received? Would it be well used?
Yeah, I think it depends on the region. So definitely in Ratnapura, that region really values it. Berula, these are trading points. There's Balangada. So like each trading point has not just very specific material that they carry to trade, but also their interests can vary. And the areas that I've just mentioned, education is very important. The more rural you get, sometimes it's not as valued. But when I say rural, meaning I'm saying maybe not much electricity, things like that. So, which is still an issue in certain parts of the country, but for the most part, I could say setting up any gemological training, setting up the library. From a very young age, kids are taught to value a book. So it's something that's been taught from a young age on.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you, Sheahan, for taking the time to do this. I know you've been busy and life has been a bit crazy. You saw Sheahan's mom with him in the markets. She goes with him all around the world, his constant travel companion. I think one thing we learned about this is you're right. You can't sleep with the gemstones. And like everything in our industry, this one is also based on trust, and that you have to trust your sources and trust your chain of custody. It's all built on trust, just like what we have in the retail world. So I trust I'll see you guys again sometime soon.
Yeah,
I still have wine. Cheers, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sheahan. Thank you,
Thanks,
GIA.
Carl. I wanted to thank GIA and the local GIA alumni chapter also for inviting me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheahan.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody
All
can talk
Good
now.
night. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone. Have a good time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Hi,
night.
Penny.
Thank
Hi,
you,
Hi,
Stala.
Jeffrey. Hi,
Bye.
Sweetie.
Bye. See
Oh,
you
man, I
later.
missed you all.
Hi.
Thank you, Sheahan.
Oh, you're
Thanks,
welcome,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you.